Today, in part 2 of Courtside's 10-part 2019 NFL preview, I'm going to dive into the NFC North Division, one of the deepest divisions in the entire NFL. I'll tell you which team I have pulling away with the division title, which teams are bound to miss the playoffs, and why Lions head coach Matt Patricia is likely to be canned at some point this season. So sit back, relax, and take a seat. Courtside. Welcome to episode 27 of Courtside. I'm your host, Andrew Cohen. As I said in the intro, today's part 2 of Courtside's big 10-part 2019 NFL preview. Yesterday I talked about the NFC East, so if you haven't checked that out, I would highly recommend doing so. Here's a reminder of how these episodes are going to work. I'm going to spend about 4 to 5 minutes talking about each team in every division. I'll talk about the teams in the order I think they're going to finish in that division, right? First, second, third, fourth. As I said in yesterday's episode, behind the scenes, I've predicted every single game for the 2019 NFL season. I've gone through every single team's schedule, picked every single win, every single loss, record versus division, versus teams over 500, under 500, etc. It's very all-inclusive. I've done a lot of work on that. I'm not going to go through every team's schedule and every single game. I think that'd be boring. I don't think I'm going to be right most of the time, but it does give me a baseline as far as where I think every team is going to stack up in their respective divisions and conferences this year. So, let's start off with the team I have finishing first in the NFC North Division, the Chicago Bears. And I'll start off with this. Last year, coming into the year, I was very high on the Chicago Bears. If you listen to the NFL preview I did last year, about 1 year ago today, I talked about the Bears being a potential wild card threat, pushing for the 6, maybe even the 5 seed. I did not see them winning their division, but this year I'm very, very high on them again. I'll start off with one reason why, the running backs. Specifically David Montgomery, who they drafted in the 3rd round this year. And last year, the Bears had the 6th most rushing attempts in the league, so a very rush-heavy offense. But they were only 11th in yards per game because they were very inefficient, mainly because of Jordan Howard. Right? Tariq Cohen was very efficient. Jordan Howard only averaged 3.7 yards per carry. The Bears as a whole, rushing-wise, were tied for 5th least in yards per carry. The only teams that finished with a lower yards per carry average throughout the entire season: Cardinals, Buccaneers, Jets, Eagles. With the exception of the Eagles, all those teams were bottom feeders in the NFL. Not very good, right? The Jets were picking high in the draft. Bucs picking high in the draft. Cardinals picking high in the draft, right? Not very good teams. And again, that low efficiency mainly had to do with Jordan Howard, who's going to be replaced by David Montgomery this season, a 3rd round pick out of, I believe, Iowa State. Every single time the coaching staff, and specifically Matt Nagy, the head coach, speaks about Montgomery, they cannot stop raving about him. They cannot say enough about this guy. I expect him to tear up the league this season. I expect him to be in the Offensive Rookie of the Year conversation. And in addition to Montgomery, they already have Tariq Cohen, very effective player last year, one of my favorite players in the league to watch, honestly, not just because we share our last name, but he can do a lot of things on offense for them out of the backfield, lined up outside. It's going to be a very dynamic running back group this year. Very excited to see what David Montgomery and Tariq Cohen can do as a running back tandem. Number 2, I want to focus on Roquan Smith specifically on this defense. There's a lot of guys I could have chosen on the defense, but Roquan Smith specifically. So last year, he finished tied for 8th among linebackers and tied for 9th overall in the NFL in solo tackles. He had 89, right? So again, tied for 8th with linebackers, tied for 9th in total in the NFL. He ranked 29th in defensive snaps among linebackers. So on a per-game basis, much more efficient in getting tackles than a lot of other guys in the league, which I think is just really impressive for his rookie season. He also had 5 sacks, an interception, very versatile middle linebacker, can do a lot of things on the field for the Bears. I expect him to take an even bigger leap this year. I expect him to break out, be one of the best middle linebackers in the entire NFL. Again, just very underrated. He was a 1st-round pick. I think he went very under the radar because you had guys in the defense last year like Khalil Mack and Eddie Jackson and Kyle Fuller having huge monster seasons. I think Roquan Smith went a little under the radar because of that. So I pay a lot of attention to him this year. Again, I think he breaks out and becomes one of the best linebackers in the entire NFL. And finally, I have to focus on Mitchell Trubisky because when you look at the roster, the biggest criticism you can have about this roster is that Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback might be a little bit questionable. And I'll agree, right? He's not Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes. He's not in that conversation. but I think he's a lot better than people are giving him credit for. And last year, I just want to point out the growth he had, right? First game of last year, they're in Green Bay against the Packers. They go up 20-0 early. They choke the lead. They end up down 24-23. 2 minutes left in the game. 2 timeouts remaining. Trubisky gets the ball on his own 13-yard line. All he needs to do is get into field goal range, right? Doesn't even need to score a touchdown. Just needs to get into field goal range. 2 minutes. 2 timeouts. They're about to go 4 and out. Right? It's not starting off well. They get a chunk of yards, though, on a roughing the passer penalty. So they kind of got bailed out. And then they go on to convert one more first down. They don't get into field goal range. Game's over. They lose the first game. Very disappointing way to start the year. And Trubisky finished the game 23 for 35 passing, 171 yards. Didn't pass for a touchdown. Did rush for a touchdown. 32 rushing yards on 7 attempts. But just throwing the football looked very uncomfortable. Didn't look like... he was really looking to run outside of the pocket and take off and try to scramble for yards. He just did not look comfortable throwing from the pocket. But then you look to the game against the Eagles in the playoffs. They're down 10-9 early in the fourth quarter. Trubisky leads the Bears down the field to score the go-ahead touchdown. Then losing 16-15 with 56 seconds left, Tariq Cohen gets this huge kick return, gets the Bears to their own 42-yard line. Trubisky hits Allen Robinson for a huge 25-yard pass. Hits Robinson again for another 8 to 9 yards. They get to the Eagles' 22-yard line. And then, of course, you have Mr. Double Doink Cody Parkey blowing the game. So the whole narrative of that game changed. It went from Mitchell Trubisky, playoff hero, leads the Bears down the field multiple times in the fourth quarter to take the lead and ultimately win the game, to Cody Parkey missed a field goal. Nick Foles is some magical being that is unbelievable, right? He's coming from I don't even know where, just a magical playoff guy. Trubisky in this game, aside from just the pure late game drives, he looked amazing. 26 for 43 passing, 303 yards, a touchdown, no picks. Only rushed 3 times. He wasn't looking to scramble out of the pocket. He was looking to stand in there, make throws, and he did that consistently throughout the game. He was poised, he was clutch. And yet, a lot of people are still doubting him. I admit, he wasn't an amazing quarterback last year. He had a bunch of games where you wish he could have been a little bit better, but I think he's a lot better than people are giving him credit for. I have the Bears at 13-3 this year. I'm very high on the Bears. The biggest question mark, it's the quarterback. But if Trubisky plays well, and I expect him to, the Bears are going to have a monster season. I already mentioned the running backs. The coaching is great. O-line is solid. The receivers, Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller, Taylor Gabriel, all entering their second season. Allen Robinson specifically last year was coming off a torn ACL, and you saw him get stronger as the year went on. I expect that to continue. This defense, to me, is still the best in the NFL. 3-4 scheme with 4 linebackers of Khalil Mack, Roquan Smith, Leonard Floyd, very young athletic player. I've heard a lot of great things about him this offseason. And Danny Trevathan, a very solid veteran middle linebacker. Nice field general guy. Very tough to play the Bears. Good running game, good defense, and the passing game is going to open up for them this year. I expect them to take a huge leap forward in 2019, finish with a 13-3 record. Number 2 in the NFC North Division, I have the Green Bay Packers. Biggest storyline to watch here is the relationship between Aaron Rodgers and new head coach Matt LaFleur coming over from the Tennessee Titans. Last year, the thing we heard all year was Aaron Rodgers, Mike McCarthy, they just weren't seeing eye to eye. Mike McCarthy would call a play, Aaron Rodgers would get up to the line, call a new play, and I think it was really interesting with the receivers because the receivers, their playing time depends on the coach. But Aaron Rodgers is calling the plays. So which route do they run? Do they run the route Mike McCarthy called or Aaron Rodgers called? You run the route McCarthy called, you get more play time, but you don't make Aaron Rodgers happy. You run the route Aaron Rodgers called, you make Aaron Rodgers happy, but you're sitting on the bench for the next 10 plays. So it's a very interesting dynamic that occurred last year with Aaron Rodgers being very anti-Mike McCarthy, right? Doing his own thing. And this is my biggest criticism of Aaron Rodgers. He's very much his own guy, likes to do his own thing, gets up to the line, calls his own plays, gets the snap, he'll run out of the pocket, he'll improvise after plays have been called, trying to make a huge play, right? Trying to make the highlight reel play. And I thought that was very evident last year. I didn't think he was as into winning last year. I thought he was more in it for himself and, making himself look good, making the stats look good, all of that. Again, very much evident last year. And in football, the two guys with the most authority on a football team are the head coach and the quarterback. If the quarterback starts questioning the head coach, his teammates are going to follow, right? Well, yeah, maybe this head coach isn't as big of a deal as he seems to be making himself, right? You start to get a little, you push back against the leadership, the head coaching a little bit. And that's what I think we had with Mike McCarthy. I think some of his teammates kind of followed suit, weren't into Mike McCarthy being the head coach there. He ends up getting the boot. And this year, there have been some rumblings about potential disagreements and drama between Rodgers and LaFleur, and with joint practices and stuff like that. And I know that, Aaron Rodgers came out and said it was all not true. The fact of the matter is, the relationship between Rodgers and LaFleur is going to determine how good the Packers do this year, in my mind. If it just isn't working out, Rodgers is going to do a pretty similar thing to what he did last year and just, I don't want to say mail it in, but, does he care about winning games as much? Maybe not. Right? Does he go all in every single week? Maybe not. So that will be a relationship to watch as the season goes on. Number 2 is the running game. The Packers had the fewest rushing attempts in the league last year, yet they were the second most efficient rushing offense. 5 yards per carry. The Panthers, who finished first, had 5.1, so it was very close. That does not make any sense. It doesn't add up. One of the most efficient rushing offenses in the league, but they didn't utilize it. Aaron Jones himself averaged 5.5 yards per carry. They only gave him 11 rushes a game. I cannot understand why that was what was going on there in Green Bay. They just didn't want to run the football for some reason. Maybe part of it has to do with Aaron Rodgers getting up to the line. A run play was called, but he's going to audible to a pass play because that's what he wants to do, right? So when you look back to Eddie Lacy, and he had 3 good years in a Green Bay uniform, the offense was really top of the league good when he was getting consistent carries week in, week out. I think the Packers can get the running game going again this year. It's going to really open up the pass game. I think they'll be way more successful and win a lot more games because of it. Storyline number 3 is the Packers secondary. Now, the Packers defense overall, really solid all the way around. Defensive line, linebackers, secondary. The Green Bay front office, 2-3 years ago, this defense was really, really bad. One of the worst in the league. They've really done a great job of rebuilding it over the past couple years. Now, the D-line does have some holes left behind after they released Mike Daniels at the end of July. And the linebackers are good. They drafted Rashawn Gary in the first round, outside linebacker. He'll play kind of as a pass rusher, an edge rusher. But there's nobody there. Zadarius Smith, Blake Martinez. There's nobody there that gets me super excited at the linebacker position. But I do get excited with the secondary because in the secondary, they traded away Clinton Dix at the trade deadline last year. They signed former Bears safety Adrian Amos in the offseason. That's a huge upgrade in my opinion. They also drafted Darnell Savage Jr. in the first round this year. At corner, they have Jair Alexander, former first-round pick of 2018. Josh Jackson, a second-round pick in 2018, so they went heavy corner there, and I really liked that. They also drafted Kevin King, 2017 second round. So young players, all showing a lot of promise early in their careers. Really bodes well for the Packers going forward. But I want to see if Savage, Alexander, King, Jackson, can one of them turn into a real stud? One of the best secondary players, one of the best defensive backs in the league. If that happens, this defense is going to be really good. And if you get Jair Alexander playing really well, Savage playing really well, Amos playing really well, Kevin King, Josh Jackson, it's going to be one of the best secondaries in the entire league, which will be huge for the Packers this year. Final record, it might seem a little bit low, but I have them only at 9-7. They have some tough games this year. They're opening 5 games. At Bears, home versus Vikings, home versus Broncos, home versus Eagles, at Cowboys. None of these are easy wins. I have them beating the Broncos for sure. But I see them losing to the Bears week 1. The Vikings are a tough divisional matchup in week 2. Cowboys on the road. You'd like to play them at home. You do get to play the Eagles at home. Eagles are going to be a tough team. I think top to bottom, they have a better roster than the Packers. So early on, it could be a slow start. And again, let's see, does Aaron Rodgers trust Matt LaFleur if they do have a slow start? But I think after that, I see them winning 6-7 of their next 8 games. Although, again, the tough start is going to draw them back a little bit for the overall standings. I have them finishing at 9-7. Yeah, they can win an extra game, right? I'm not saying they won't go 10-6, push for a wild card spot, but I have them at 9-7 right now. I think just ultimately they have a tough schedule early on, and that's going to really hold them back in terms of their winning record. With a third place finish in the NFC North, I have the Minnesota Vikings. And what I want to start off with this team is there's been a lot of negativity towards the way Kirk Cousins played last year and how he's one of the most overpaid guys in the league. But I would argue there were a lot more players on the team than just Kirk Cousins that underachieved last year and really contributed to the down season that the Vikings had. Specifically on the defensive side of the ball, number one, I had Everson Griffen. You have Everson Griffen, Pro Bowler in 2015, 16, and 17, had 13 sacks in 2017. That number goes down to 5.5 in 2018. He wasn't a Pro Bowler. He's now heading into his age 32 season. So questions start to begin about a decline. They also had Linval Joseph at defensive tackle. Pro Bowler in 2016 and 2017. This year, 2018, sacks, tackles, quarterback hits, down across the board, doesn't make the Pro Bowl. Then you have Xavier Rhodes, Pro Bowler in 2016 and 17. 2016 and 17. First team All-Pro cornerback in 2017. This guy was feared as one of the best shutdown cornerbacks in the league. You did not want to throw his way. Not even a Pro Bowler in 2018. Really struggled. He's not viewed as that top number one shutdown corner anymore. So there were a lot more players than just Kirk Cousins that kind of struggled last year and really contributed to the disappointing season that the Vikings had. And specifically here with Griffen and Joseph, right? Those guys are both on the wrong side of 30. So you start to wonder, was it a down season? Was it just a couple down games? Or is it these guys are on the decline, they're not going to ever be as good as they were? So those are some questions you have to pay attention to this year with the Vikings. Number two, you got to watch out for Kirk Cousins this year. Really interesting because they paid him fully guaranteed money. His entire contract was guaranteed. So they're paying him a lot of money. And listen, Kirk Cousins is a significantly better quarterback than Case Keenum. Case Keenum's a journeyman. He's been a backup for the majority of his career. He signed with the Broncos last year. They already shipped him out of there for Joe Flacco, who's not very good, to be honest with you, at this point in his career. So Kirk Cousins is much better quarterback than Case Keenum. So for the people that keep saying, no, Case Keenum was better with this team, the defense was better that year. The rest, the offensive line was better with Case Keenum. The circumstances around Case Keenum were much better. But let's just look at the head-to-head stats between Case Keenum in 2017, Kirk Cousins 2018. Case Keenum 2017, 325 completions on 481 attempts, 67.6 completion percentage, 3,500 yards, 22 touchdowns, 7 picks. Kirk Cousins, 425 completions in 606 attempts. That's 100 more completions, 125 more attempts than Case Keenum. The Vikings were obviously a lot more comfortable passing the ball with Kirk Cousins. That means something. 70.1 completion percentage, so a higher completion percentage. 4,300 yards. More yards, about 750 more yards. 30 touchdowns. 8 more than Case Keenum. Had 3 more picks. He had 10 interceptions. Okay, fine. More interceptions than Case Keenum. Case Keenum, 6.6 yards per attempt, and then 7.1 for Kirk Cousins. That may not seem like a huge difference, but it is. It was a lot of checkdowns, quick passes to the running back, not really throwing big, deep passes down the field that are actually going to be game changers over the course of a game. Kirk Cousins was throwing the ball down the field to Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs. They both had much better seasons in 2018 than they did in 2017 with Case Keenum. Kirk Cousins was a better quarterback for this team. The difference was he just didn't play well in big games. He didn't make the playoffs. It was a disappointing year all around. Again, I don't think it was completely because of Kirk Cousins. So yeah, he gets paid a lot more than Case Keenum, in guaranteed money specifically. But I think this year, he's going to be a lot better. I think he'll be sharper. The offense will be a little bit better overall. But the offense, statistically, was not bad. It was just key moments, big games, they didn't produce. Now, here is the projected record I have for them. It might seem a little low, but hear me out. I only have them at 8-8. 8-8. 500. And I get it. I just talked to Kirk Cousins, so you're probably thinking, how does that add up to an 8-8 season? Tough schedule. Really tough. Maybe the toughest in the league. I have them playing 10 games against teams I have finishing over 500. 10 games. 6 of them on the road. They have 4 in their own division with the Packers and Bears. Those are inevitable. Every year they're going to have to play the Packers and Bears. Those are going to be tough games. If you can split those 2 season series, you're in good shape there. That's a win. And, again, you have to question, are Everson Griffin and Linval Joseph going to bounce back, or are they on the decline? Are their best playing days behind them? Is Xavier Rhodes going to return to form as a top shutdown corner, or is he going to play the same as he did last year, take another step back, and then your secondary is looking a lot weaker? So there's a lot of question marks. The biggest thing is, it was a disappointing year last year, yet they come back with the pretty much exact same roster. They re-signed Anthony Barr. They're bringing back everybody on the defense for the most part. If you had a disappointing year, you should have looked to make upgrades. You should have looked, where can we make a move that's going to make this team either younger at a certain position and or cheaper? Maybe we don't lose a ton of production, right? I'm looking at defensive tackle. Linval Joseph gets paid a good amount of money. I'm sure there's somebody else they could have drafted, they could have brought in via free agency that would produce just as much as Linval Joseph did last year, but is cheaper, younger, and allows you to make another acquisition at another spot on the team. So I'm just going to be critical of that. I think they should have made some more moves. But ultimately with this team this year, it's the schedule. It's super tough. 10 games against over 500 opponents is not going to be easy. And that's why I have the Vikings at 8-8. Just on the cusp of a wild card spot, but realistically not going to get there. And finally, we have the Detroit Lions, the bottom feeders of the NFC North Division. And here's the key thing this year, Matthew Stafford. Now, I don't have an updated stat on this, but I do know heading into the 2018 season, he was about 6-46 against winning opponents. That is concerning to say the least. He just doesn't beat winning teams. He's 0-3 in the playoffs. They're in a division where there's 3 potential playoff competitors, teams that can get to the playoffs. I have the Bears in the playoffs for sure. I have the Packers just on the cusp. The Vikings just missing, but have a playoff caliber roster. I just cannot trust Matthew Stafford to beat those teams. That's 6 games. I have the Lions going 1-5 in those games. Quite simple. It's a tough schedule, as I mentioned before, with the Vikings, the Bears, the Packers. They have tough schedules. And that's going to really hurt the Lions a lot more than it hurts these other teams because they have a quarterback that cannot beat winning opponents. Number 2 story, the defensive line. I actually like the defensive line on this team. It's one of the few spots where I'm actually they actually got some good players there. They signed Trey Flowers at defensive end. They signed Mike Daniels after the Packers surprisingly cut him back in July. So you got 2 good defensive ends. Plus they have Deshaun Hand, who's currently injured. But he had a pretty solid season last year. He's young, up and coming. On the inside of that defensive line, they have Damon Harrison, who they just signed to a 1-year extension. They have A'Shawn Robinson, former second-round pick. Those guys are going to help stuff the run, be very effective there, be really steady on the defensive line. So I actually think the defensive line is a real strong suit of this team. It's better than some winning teams are actually going to have this year on the defensive line. So that's at least one positive to take from this team that overall is going to be pretty disappointing throughout. And the number 3 thing to watch, maybe this is the most important thing to watch, but it's Matt Patricia, and he might have the hottest seat in the NFL. And I think it's very realistic to see him being fired by the Lions maybe during their bye week in week 5 or after what I see is going to be a loss in Green Bay in week 6. Look at it this way. For 4 years under the former head coach Jim Caldwell, the Lions made the playoffs twice and finished with 9 wins, at least 9 wins 3 different times in 4 years. The reason they moved on from Jim Caldwell was because they wanted to take the team to the next level. They wanted to make the playoffs consistently, have Stafford be in the MVP conversation, have a chance to win the division. Matt Patricia last year, they went 6-10. It was a really disappointing year. And this year, I've been going 5-11. Patricia is on a short leash. I have the Lions starting off at 1-3, heading into the bye. They come back, they lose to the Packers. They're 1-4. It doesn't seem like Matt Patricia runs the team particularly well. It's not going to be a good season. At the very least, Patricia will be gone after this year, in my mind. Stafford's going to have a big year. Kerryon Johnson will probably play well. Kenny Golladay will play well. They'll have certain guys on defense that play well. It won't add up to wins, though. It's not going to add up to any sort of success. They're not going to have a chance at winning the division, getting a wild card spot. Patricia will be out after the year. Again, they have to face the Packers, Bears, and Vikings each twice. They'll be 1-5 in those games. Maybe they get lucky with a couple injuries on the other side. Maybe they can go 2-4. But they also have to face the Cowboys, Eagles, Chargers, Chiefs. The Broncos and Raiders are on the same level, if not better, than the Detroit Lions. Those are all tough games. And as I've said before, Stafford struggles a ton against winning opponents. Just not a good mix heading into the 2019 NFL season. So I have the Lions, finishing with a final record of 5-11 and finishing last in the NFC North Division. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition of Courtside. If you have not already, check out yesterday's episode of the 10-part Courtside 2019 NFL preview. Talked all about the NFC East division. Go check it out. Tomorrow, I'm talking about the NFC South. Saints and Falcons both look pretty good. I'll tell you who gets the edge in my predictions tomorrow. As usual, subscribe to the podcast. Leave a like wherever you may be listening. Signing off, this is Andrew Cohen. I'll see you next time.